Today we're taking a look at the philosophical theory of psychophysical parallelism. This theory of the mind holds that mental and physical events are perfectly correlated without any causal interaction between them. In this video, we will take an overview examination of this theory of the mind, discuss arguments for and against it, why there is renewed interest in the concept, and conclude with some final thoughts on it. So, what does psychophysical parallelism mean? Psychophysical parallelism is a form of dualism, as it maintains that the mind and body are two distinct substances. However, while this theory affirms the correlation of mental and bodily events, it denies a direct cause and effect relation between mind and body. The implication is that when a mental event occurs, there is always a corresponding physical event. However, the mental event does not cause the physical event, or vice versa. This is in contrast to other forms of dualism, such as interactionism, which posits a causal relationship between the mind and body, or materialism, which views causality going one way from the body to the mind. This theory offers a third alternative by stating the idea is that while the body and mind are separate, they do operate parallel to each other. For example, if you were to bump your shin on a sharp corner, while the painful sensation happens simultaneously with impact, one did not cause the other. There are several prominent philosophers in history who developed and supported this dualist view. Nicholas Malebranche held the view that God interceded when there was a need for the mind and body to coordinate with each other. In his view, mind and body operated together because of divine intervention. Without this intervention, there would be no interaction. Baruch Spinoza's view was that mind and body were two different ways of interacting with a single reality, with God acting as the connection between the two. Gottfried Leibniz had a more complex theory involving the concept of monads and a pre-established harmony that was set in motion by God. In his view, the mind and body were like two perfectly synchronized clocks that didn't interact with each other. Now, let's consider the arguments that are made in support of psychophysical parallelism. One of the main arguments in favor of psychophysical parallelism is that it is difficult to conceive of how two substances as different as the mind and body could interact with each other. The mind is immaterial, while the body is material. Therefore, it is hard to see how these two substances could have a causal impact on each other. Another argument in favor of psychophysical parallelism is that it is a parsimonious theory. It does not require us to posit any new or mysterious forces to explain the relationship between the mind and body. Instead, it simply states that the mind and body are two distinct substances that are perfectly correlated. Finally, some philosophers have argued that psychophysical parallelism is consistent with our subjective experience. When we experience the world, we do not experience it as if our minds and bodies are two distinct substances that interact with each other. Instead, we experience our minds and bodies as a unified whole. Psychophysical parallelism can be seen as a way of accounting for this subjective experience. One of the most interesting aspects of psychophysical parallelism is its implications for our understanding of free will. If mental and physical events are perfectly correlated, but neither type of event can cause the other type of event, then it seems that our mental events cannot cause our physical actions. This would mean that we do not have free will in the sense of having the ability to choose our actions independently of our physical states. However, some philosophers have argued that psychophysical parallelism is compatible with a form of free will called compatibilism. This view holds that one retains the ability to make choices in spite of other factors. So, what are the arguments made against psychophysical parallelism? Let's take a look at some of them. One of the main arguments against psychophysical parallelism is that it is incompatible with the findings of neuroscience. Neuroscience has shown that the mind and body are closely interconnected, and that mental events can have a causal impact on physical events. For example, when we decide to move our hand, a series of mental events takes place in our brains. These mental events lead to a series of physical events in our muscles and nerves, which ultimately result in our hand moving. Another argument against psychophysical parallelism is that it is ad hoc. It simply states that the mind and body are perfectly correlated, without providing any explanation for why this is the case. Opponents find this not to be a very satisfying explanation, since it does not tell us anything about the nature of the relationship between the mind and body. In a similar argument, atheists and agnostics think that, historically speaking, this view is very dependent on there being a God. As such, they find the idea incompatible with their views since it requires a supernatural being of some type to coordinate events of mind and body. They argue that it is simply too mysterious to believe that mental and physical events can be perfectly correlated without any causal connection between them. Finally, some philosophers have argued that psychophysical parallelism is actually inconsistent with our subjective experience, not consistent as supporters state. When we experience the world, we feel as if our minds are actively controlling our bodies. For example, when we decide to move our hand, we feel as if our minds are causing our hand to move. Psychophysical parallelism cannot account for this subjective experience, as it denies that there is any causal interaction between the mind and body. Now, let's take a look at why in recent years, there has been a renewed interest in psychophysical parallelism among some philosophers. This is due in part to the fact that some of the objections to psychophysical parallelism have been addressed. For example, some philosophers have argued that it is possible to reconcile psychophysical parallelism with the findings of neuroscience by positing that mental events are supervenient on physical events. This means that mental events cannot exist without corresponding physical events, but that physical events can exist without corresponding mental events. Another reason for the renewed interest in psychophysical parallelism is that it offers a way of understanding the mind-body problem that is neither interactionist nor epiphenomenalist. Interactionism holds that mental events can cause physical events and vice versa. Epiphenomenalism holds that mental events are caused by physical events, but that mental events cannot cause physical events. Psychophysical parallelism offers a third way, by holding that mental and physical events are perfectly correlated, but that neither type of event can cause the other type of event. Furthermore, the theory holds a solution to causal closure. This philosophical idea holds that all events are caused by other events. This principle is often used to argue that mental events cannot be real, because they would violate this concept. Some philosophers say that this idea discredits dualism. However, psychophysical parallelism provides a solution to this problem for dualists. It does this by asserting that mental and physical events are two separate and distinct realms. They do not interact with each other, but they are perfectly correlated. This means that whenever a mental event occurs, a corresponding physical event occurs, and vice versa. However, there is no causal connection between the two events. They are simply two sides of the same coin. So, what do you think of this concept? Do you find it thought-provoking or too mystical for your tastes? To me, psychophysical parallelism is another alternative way to reconcile dualism and monism, although it is a dualist theory. In some ways, it's similar to emergentism and panpsychism that I've discussed in other videos. Ultimately, I think that the distinction between dualism and monism is not always as clear-cut as it may seem and may not even be that meaningful of a distinction. However, I do find these philosophical ideas that seek to reconcile these two views as a good way to arrive at a philosophy that's coherent and consistent with our experience of the world. Thanks for watching. Please give me a like if you enjoyed this video and please comment to let me know your thoughts on it. Also, check out our other videos about other philosophical topics.